Hello, I'm Lynn Bondurant at the NASA Lewis Research Center in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm your host for this final program in the series called Life in the Universe. In this series, we have seen a variety of things about man as he developed ways to live and work in space. We saw some of the essential equipment needed for long space journeys, a regenerative system, protective garments, and some knowledge of the effects of weightlessness and radiation on the human body. We saw moments from historic firsts in space travels. We saw experiments that looked for life in lunar samples and meteorites. We learned about theories on the origins of life and learned what our probes found out about Venus, Jupiter, and Mars. For untold generations, the only way our race could travel through space was through our imagination. Countless stories in science fiction have taken us to other planets and galaxies and have introduced us to alien races and civilizations. Jules Verne, a pioneer for modern science fiction, sent men to the moon in his book, From the Earth to the Moon. Let's take a look at the predictions Verne made in his novel written in the 1800s.
Almost a century ago, an imaginative Frenchman wrote a book about manned space travel. His name was Jules Verne. He was not a scientist, but he helped spur interest in the dream, the idea of man traveling in space. In his novel, From the Earth to the Moon, he wrote, "The spaceship must attain a velocity of 12,000 yards per second to escape Earth's gravity. The moon is a moving target. This must be considered in calculating the exact moment of firing." He suggested a launch site at 0 degrees to 28 degrees north or south latitude and pointed to the state of Florida as an ideal choice. In dealing with the design of a spacecraft, Jules Verne said that the spaceship should be a veritable nest, extremely well padded. Though his conception of a spacecraft appears a bit old-fashioned to us today, he quite accurately predicted much that we now know as fact. The spacewalk, for instance. He said, "Why cannot we launch ourselves into space, walk outside our spacecraft like a meteor?" We can, if we prepare ourselves with some means to supply our travelers with oxygen. Would it be cold in outer space? The French novelist said, down to 218 degrees below zero. Even the need for protection against meteoroids was foreseen by the thoughtful science fiction writer, who described them as flaming like swords and creating serious perils. Verne foresaw the need for retro rockets to slow the craft on re-entry. His were uncanny predictions of the hazards faced by man in space.
Jules Verne's imaginative story became a reality in 1969 with this country's first moon landing. Many of the things he envisioned were a part of the Apollo program: a Florida launch site, retro rockets, spacesuit, weightlessness, and an ocean recovery. Another famous science fiction story was War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Parts of Wells' story were dramatized on the radio by actor Orson Welles and others during a Mercury Theater presentation in 1938. They were speculations nobody wanted to come true. Let's listen to Orson Welles as he reads some of the imagining of H.G. Wells.
Before the cylinder fell, there was a general persuasion that through all the deep of space, no life existed beyond the petty surface of our own minute sphere. We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's. Across an immense ethereal gulf, minds that are to our minds as our minds are to the beasts in the jungle. Intellects, vast, cool, and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes, and surely drew their plans against us. Hello, I'm Orson Welles, and I've been quoting from another Wells, no relation, H.G. Wells, the distinguished novelist, historian, prophet, who was also the great master of science fiction. He wrote The War of the Worlds, on which was based a certain notorious radio broadcast, which, as some of you may remember, sent many thousands of our listeners panicking into the streets all over the country. H.G. denounced me for doing it, but later when he realized that our broadcast, like his story, was not intended to cause riots, but just to entertain, we got to be good friends. And I was forgiven. Whether all those people who jammed the highways and even took to the hills to escape the Martians have forgiven me is another matter.
This novel, and certainly the radio broadcast, affected many people, as does a great deal of modern science fiction writers. Sometimes imaginations come true. Jules Verne predicted aircraft, submarines, and of course a trip to the moon. In our own time, the famous science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke predicted and invented communication satellites. Beliefs and ideas are sometimes hard to change. For countless years, humankind believed the Earth was the center of the universe. Some challenged this concept. Let's take a look at a film clip that shows Copernicus' thoughts about the Earth revolving around the Sun, not the other way around. His imagining changed the scope of our understanding of the universe.
400 years ago, the lords and ladies, their jesters, the knights, and the peasants believed the solar system looked like this. The Earth in the center, the Sun out there, going around us. One of the men thinking about this was a Polish doctor, Nicholas Copernicus. He found an answer that his mind couldn't resist. The Sun is really at the center. The Earth goes around the Sun. But the establishment wasn't easily moved. It was easier for them to move Copernicus and his Earth with him. But then came Johann Kepler, a German. He believed Copernicus, but thought he'd satisfy the powers that be as long as the new universe moved in perfect circles. But then Kepler saw the truth. His mathematics insisted the circles needed stretching. The orbits were elliptical. From Italy came Galileo. Hitting upon Kepler's notes, he came up with a telescope. And he saw the stars, myriads where others before him had seen only thousands. And he saw that the planet Venus has phases, like the moon, which proved it must be orbiting the Sun. And the moons of Jupiter? If a planet could have satellites, why not the Sun? Finally, an Englishman, Isaac Newton, discovered why the Earth and the planets move about the Sun. It is the gravitational pull of the Sun which keeps them from flying off into space. Newton told them,
"The solar system is a great clockworks. If you understand the laws of nature, you can make or do most anything." Really?
the human race saw. became a great learning machine and made progress never before possible.
So you can see that although some imaginations of scientists and novelists were fictitious, there were also ideas that did come true and that have affected us. Following, we will hear more of Wells' narration of War of the Worlds. Then we will tune in on scientists at a symposium on extraterrestrial life that was held at Boston University in 1972. Their speculative thoughts may someday become realized, just as the thoughts of Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, and Jules Verne were. Once again, here is Orson Welles.
If there is life out there, intelligent life, how did we ever get the notion that it might be otherwise than friendly? Well, Mars, of course, is the god of war, so the planet bearing his name might be expected to have warlike intentions. In our broadcast, the Martians were as aggressive and ruthless as any human being. Ridiculous assumption on the face of it. They were supposedly as bad as we are, at our worst, and also much uglier. They brandished death rays in their slimy tentacles. And for a while at least, just toward the end of the radio play, they appeared to be totally invincible. What finally stopped them? Well, here's the way it went. In the words of the mythical Professor Pearson of Princeton, who was our commentator, I remember, he said, writing in his journal when the whole thing was put together again and the world was in business, I remember wandering through Manhattan, standing alone on Times Square, and catching sight of a lean dog running down 7th Avenue with a piece of dark brown meat in its jaws. I walked up Broadway, past silent shop windows, and suddenly I caught sight of a Martian machine. And then across Columbus Circle, I could see, standing in a silent row, 19 of those great metal titans, their cowls empty, their steel arms hanging listlessly by their sides. And I looked for the monsters that inhabit those machines, and then, before my eyes, I saw them stark and silent. The Martians themselves, with a flock of hungry birds pecking and tearing brown shreds of flesh from their dead bodies. And later, when their bodies were examined in laboratories, it was found that they had been killed by disease bacteria, against which their systems were unprepared. Slain after all man's defenses had failed by the humblest thing that God in his wisdom had put upon this earth, the common cold. And that's the way it was. Well, quite a lot of things have happened in the world since then. An invasion from the planet Mars, that at least is one thing that didn't happen. But in a way, you know, we have been invading Mars. If Mars hasn't exactly been invaded, well, it's certainly been investigated, not attacked, but thoroughly, very thoroughly studied. Observations of Mars had begun long before our broadcast, and even back then, in 1938, it seemed plausible to many people that life could have developed on Mars, just as it had on Earth. In the fictional Martian story, in the War of the Worlds, it was understood that the Martians were fighting for their own survival. Their planet was growing so cold and inhospitable that they might perish if they remained. Well, real life, confined to such a planet, would fight for survival by trying to change itself. Evolving. Every living thing on Earth has evolved from the lowly, the invisibly small microbe. Given nourishment, the microbe will grow colonies so vast that they rapidly become visible to the eye. Here on our planet, microbes have adapted to survive the most hostile conditions. Arid deserts, the frozen Himalayas, in trenches under thousands of tons of pressure in the ocean deeps. Biologists at Ames Laboratory are discovering adaptive capabilities in life forms that a few years ago would have been regarded as fantastic. Within the cooling systems of atomic reactors, organisms have been discovered, flourishing, where radiation could be expected to destroy any living thing. In hospitals that use ultraviolet for sterilization, strains have been found resistant to the killing radiation. Biologists are growing organisms in salt solutions, in acids, in alkalines, in ammonia gas, in boiling hot springs, in ice that is thawed for part of every day. In the vacuum of a space simulator, life forms have been flourishing for years without oxygen. Scientists are studying the kinds of environments that could challenge life forms on the planets and moons of the solar system. Exobiologists are studying other environments, even as they prepare to search directly for life beyond the planet Earth. The discovery of just one bacteria on Mars or any other body of the solar system would indicate that the whole chain of evolutions, cosmic, chemical, and biological, is at work everywhere. In that case, the creation of life anywhere in the universe would be more the rule than the exception. In that case, there may be other intelligent civilizations capable of communicating with us. In impact on ourselves of contact with another intelligent civilization, how it might come about and what the effects might be, is now being discussed by serious thinkers the world over.
When we speak of life beyond Earth, what we generally mean is, of course, intelligent life, something resembling our noble selves. It is highly probable that there are such intelligent forms of life in other galaxies in the universe.
It is now okay to talk about life elsewhere or intelligent life elsewhere, whereas a decade or two ago it wasn't okay. It was considered too speculative to be worth any investment of time.
As an example of the modern scientific attitude, I'd like to quote a short passage from a recent report of the Astronomy Survey Committee of the prestigious and august National Academy of Sciences of the United States, probably the nation's most distinguished scientific body. This was printed in May of this year. Quote, "Each passing year has seen our estimate of the probability of life in space increase, along with our capabilities of detecting it. More and more scientists feel that contact with other civilizations is no longer something beyond our dreams, but is a natural event in the history of mankind that will perhaps occur within the lifetime of many of us. The promise is now too great, either to turn away from it or to wait much longer before devoting major resources to a search for other intelligent beings. In the long run, this may be one of science's most important and most profound contributions to mankind and to our civilization." End quote. The basic point, very simply put, is that the number of stars in our galaxy alone is so staggeringly large, in the order of 10 to the 11 or more, The probability of stars having planetary systems is so high, we think perhaps half. The probability that those planetary systems might be comparable with our own, and that the stars have some kind of an ecosphere, a sphere in which the radiation is suitable for life, that it's not too hot, not too cold, meeting the other criteria, seems so reasonable. These bits of information have come from astronomy primarily. And then we join with the biochemists who tell us about the probable evolution of life here on Earth, the kinds of elements that are necessary for it, DNA molecules, amino acids and the like, amino acids which have now been found in meteorites, that we have now found interstellar molecules floating out in the space between stars. So that you know the materials for a carbon-based life exist. We know that many of the building blocks of life in our own solar system exist off of our planet. If you put these kinds of probabilities together, it begins to lead to the sorts of conclusions that we started with as an initial premise, and which apparently no one on the panel has disagreed, and that is that life must exist in the universe, and it must exist quite abundantly.
The most optimistic estimates, in the view of many, about the number of civilizations that there might be in the galaxy is of the order of 1 million, which means that only one in a few 100,000 stars has such civilizations.
That would mean 1 billion such places just in our own galaxy that might contain life.
As I believe there's a society of these groups, not just one. There are probably very many. There's only one, we have no hope of finding them. There are probably thousands, maybe as many as 1 million. They probably already have had a long history of this same experience of finding new ones and bringing them into the network.
I think there's no question but that we live in an inhabited universe that has life all over it.
What I'm imagining is the facts that I've just stated becoming generally known, so that people know that out there is 1 million other civilizations. They all look fabulously ugly, and they're all a lot smarter than us. That seems to me useful and a character-building experience for mankind.
So I think, first of all, there will be two great phases of this eventual time, which I think will come in 10 years or 100 years, or I don't know, maybe longer, when some satisfactory radio telescope work or something similar will acquire evidence of the deliberate beaming of a message, protracted message out into space. First of all, I think the most important issue is the recognition of the existence of the message. Just that it is there, not what it says. This is called, often technically, the acquisition of the message. And there will be, of course, false starts. There'll be many claims. Already have been some claims, I think rather facetious ones, that some phenomenon in the sky must have this meaning. But they turned out to be wrong. I believe that will happen a number of times, 3 times, 10 times. False claims will be made. We have got something, and it cannot be anything else save that. So I think that will be easy and, of course, extraordinarily important. You will know very little of what that message says, save that it exists, and maybe some general geographic information from how far away it's coming, to what kind of a star, where. And then I think that you will have pouring into the recorders, week after week, month after month, decade after decade, an enormous body of obviously interesting and meaningful pulses. And you'll be able to read them slowly and fitfully, because they will not be coded, but they'll be anti-coded. That's to say, the people who designed them, the beings who designed them, will have thought very carefully how to make the maximum number of mathematical clues. The best way to single out the meaning will be made available. But it will come with 2 extraordinary differences, so great we can hardly imagine how great they are. First, the people who do it will be incredibly alien. Even if their biochemistry resembles the biochemistry Professor Wald teaches, it will not be all that close, you know. It will have enzymes, but it will be, the LG situation will be quite different, and I don't know what chains of enzyme systems they will have at all. And you couldn't eat their food, very likely, even though it's the same biochemistry. Any more than we eat the food of a mushroom. It's very difficult to eat that. But the meaning will slowly come out of this study, and it will contain, for better or worse, the answer to many questions that we cannot ourselves answer, which we'll have to debate and interpret and work on and test. And the successors of Professor Wald will still be studying whether it could really be right what they say about this. He said, not at all. That isn't at all what that phrase means. That isn't at all what that result means. Quite a different thing is the case, and a new discovery will have been made. And I don't think at all, any more than we fail to profit by reading the literature of the other universities, will we fail to profit by reading this extraordinary message which they will contain. So I am not either fearful, nor I would say terribly expectant. I don't think we will. I'm anxious for that first acquisition to make sure that we are not alone. But once that is gained, it might be gained in my lifetime, then I think we can rest with some patience to see what complexities the world has turned up in other climates than this one.
The difference between the spacecrafts of NASA and the lurid flying saucery of that old radio War of the Worlds is the difference between science and science fiction. And yes, between war and peace. It's our own world which has turned out to be the interplanetary visitor. We're the ones who are moving out there, not with death rays, but with cameras. Not to conquer, but simply to learn. We are, in fact, behaving ourselves far better out there than we ever have back here at home on our own planet.
We know of only one instance of life in the universe, that being us on our beautiful planet Earth. But the Earth is a small part of one insignificant solar system in an undistinguished galaxy among millions in the universe. We are left still with the question as to whether life abounds in the universe, or is humankind on Earth unique, truly special creatures of creation? And yet, our imagination suggests that someday, perhaps in some remote section of this Milky Way galaxy, our first contact with aliens from another world will be made. This first encounter will open up new knowledge and trade and who knows what else. It will be a thrilling moment when a future astronaut says, "Hello, I'm from the planet Earth. I come to you in peace." This is Lynn Bondurant at NASA's Lewis Research Center in Cleveland, Ohio, saying goodbye. It's been good having you as our guests.
Thank you.